Hello once again and welcome to episode number 15 in this series. Today we're going to talk about shaping foam, a little bit about the tools that are used, which are not very many and not very expensive, and we're going to go from a rough shape, and as you can see I want to talk about this too. This of course is the solid block that comes after the last fuselage former. This is F14 was our last former, but then the fuselage extends about 52 or 53 millimeters beyond that. So just whack on a solid block back here, and we're going to then carve that shape very easily. It just takes a few strokes. So we're going to go from that, which is a very rough fuselage, to this, which is not a very rough fuselage, but it's still pretty rough. We will, and I also want to mention one thing. When you, if you, like I do, prefer a plastic tube to run your wire back to your rudder and elevator, or elevator only like mine, when you put these tubes in, like we talked about last episode, make sure that when you do, you make sure that this tube comes in and is resting down near the bottom of the fuselage. All right, make sure this curves in and down, because what we're going to do when we cut the hatch, we're going to come in here with a hot wire and we're going to cut down to this datum line and forward and up, and some of you might cut down here and back that way. Anyway, you don't want to get a hot wire involved with whatever you've got on the inside. Keep the hot wire away from any guides or anything that you've installed now, so that it'll cut smoothly. So this is a semi-roughed out. This is a rough, semi-roughed out, and here's how it got that way. Hello everyone. Next up, we begin shaping the fuselage. Segments have all been glued together now, including the very back end, which is just a chunk of foam, and that only takes a few seconds to shape off. Before we get it outside, which is where I'm going to do most of this because of the dust, then if you're restricted to an inside area for this sanding, you need to make up some sort of a dust collection system. A friend of mine uses one of these square box fans, and he sewed up some dress lining into a big bag, and he sits that down, attaches it with Velcro to his fan, turns that box fan on, and does all of his shaping in front of that. The box fan blows the dust into his homemade collection system, and he does fine. But since I'm here in sunny Florida, we get a lot of time to do this outdoors. Now, we had a couple of rainy days, so it's taken me a few days to come back to this project, but here we are. Got nice sunshine outside, so I'll be doing most of this outside. Before we do that, take a look at the tools involved. Now, this is a rasp. Most of the stuff is available at any big box store like Home Depot. You hold this up. This is just a small shaping rasp. Now, the teeth are quite aggressive, and you would think, well, you don't want to use that on foam, but believe it or not, this works quite well. So this the length of the cutting blade here is a couple of inches, no more, maybe an inch and a half, inch and a quarter wide. But this rasp works very well. Next is this is a 3D printed sanding tool, but they're available. You can also get these at big box stores. This is 1 inch wide, 80 grit cloth belt, also available. Big box stores. More big box store stuff. This is a 220 grit sanding grid, and this works really well. Believe it or not, I use this freehand. I don't use the backing plate, but this is made by 3M, and what it's made to do is attach to the base of a drywall sander. This is drywall sanding screen, I think is the term for it. Now last, but certainly not least, is probably the handiest foam working tool that I have ever run across. This, and let me get up here so you can read what we're doing here. This is a chef's zester. It's meant to zest or take the peel from citrus. It's made by a company called Microplane. I think maybe you can see that there, Microplane. And this thing is sharp. It is extremely sharp, and it stays sharp for a long time. I've had this one for a very long time. And this zester, this is just called the Classic Series. Classic Series. And it's made by Microplane. I've got stuff all over this one's been kicking around for years. Ignore the glue, but Microplane. And it's available on Amazon. And they come in various versions with and without a handle. I prefer this one without a handle. It allows you to get right down on a surface and keep it nice, straight, and true. And it removes foam very well. Leaves an extremely nice surface behind. But a Microplane zester. Okay, that's some of the stuff that I'm going to use to start shaping and fairing these fuselage segments. Now, we're going to, of course, end up with a fairly rough surface, which we'll go over with finer and finer grits. But the initial shaping is done with the tools that I just talked to you about. And I'll also be shaping the cockpit. But again, these tools are extremely inexpensive. A couple of bucks for this. This was printed free. A couple of bucks for this. I think the Microplane is probably the most expensive thing there, and it's about $8 or $9. So use whatever you have, but these are the tools that I use, and it makes shaping this foam a lot easier. Okay, we're outside. I'm going to start the shaping. You guys get to hear the yappy dog just a few minutes. We get to hear it all day, every day. But going ahead, I'll start out with the very coarse, the coarsest of the shapers. And of course you always work now. You can see with just a few minutes shaping, it comes right off. Now of course you don't want to take this all the way down with this tool because it's just really pulling out large chunks, but for quickly shaping large areas of foam without tearing the foam too badly or pulling off huge chunks, this tool works its way right down. And all I'm doing now is just some basic shaping, and you can see it goes very fast. And you can also see why you want to do this outside. The little styrofoam balls and dust. This is probably the biggest drawback, I guess, to this kind of building technique. As you can see, you get styrofoam snow everywhere. But with just a few seconds worth of rough shaving, we've gone from a square block back here to close. Now that's just a few seconds. Next up, take the Microplane. Now the good thing about the Microplane is it takes off less foam but it takes it off very quickly, and I can follow, I can use the long edge of this now to follow the shape of the fuselage. And once again, you can see how quickly that foam disappears. Now we're working with a big chunk back here, so it's going to take a few minutes. So let me just shape this, and I'll shape this down a lot closer, and I'll be right back. Then we'll talk about what to do to the body of the fuselage. And now the rough shaping is complete, and that only took moments to get that down from a big rectangular block of foam down to a close shape. Now that's a close shape because we still have the entire fuselage to do, and I'm going to start doing that now. And of course, I'm not going to stand here and do this these things are turning into to much longer than I anticipated anyway. But what I'm going to do is more shaping on this. But before I leave, there's one more important thing I'd like to talk about, and that's this. You recall how important that these marks were in aligning the fuselage, top, bottom, sides. I'm going to go back inside now before I commence a lot of sanding on and shaping on this. And I'm going to draw over this with a Sharpie marker so that I've got a line, top, bottom, both fuselage sides, and I've got a good solid line. Now as I shape this, of course, the lines will tend to disappear, and as they disappear, I redraw them, because you must keep this line on both sides of the fuselage intact. Keeping the line top and bottom is not quite so important, but it really helps in developing a nice, smooth, and uniform shape all the way around your fuselage. So I'm going to draw these back in with a fine point Sharpie, and then I'm going to start the final shaping, rough shaping, with the microplane. The rest of the tools, I probably won't use that. I probably won't use this coarse grater again. But the rest of the tools, the microplane, the 80 grit sandpaper, and the drywall sanding grid will be used again. And I'll commence or keep going with the shaping. We also have to shape the front of the cockpit, because our templates did not end right where the cockpit ends. But that's easy to do, and again, it's shaping foam. This stuff goes away very quickly, very easily, and just by eyeball shaping, you can keep the curves nice and fair and smooth. Okay, I'm back outside my shed again, and this is what I'm referring to about keeping these longitudinal lines intact. Now, this is freshly drawn, and some of this, of course, is going to be planed away, but as it's planed away, these lines are going to be remarked over and over as many times as it takes until the fuselage shaping is complete. These lines are going to remain on there as guides. Okay, I'll return to shaping. Again, there's no point in running the video through all of that. It's just shaping foam, And you continue shaping until you get this base foam layer down to its final shape. Then we will finish sanding it, and at that point we're going to do the fuselage cutouts. The cutouts for the wing saddle, the cutout for, we're going to cut all the way back to the back of the canopy for the hatch, and we'll do, of course, the platform back here in the back for the horizontal stabilizer cutout. But we won't do any of those cutouts until we get the fuselage shape faired in. After we do all the cutouts, then we will do the filling. You're going to end up with a lot of divots. This is, after all, EPS foam. It's not going to have a satin smooth surface. It's going to have divots in it and holes, and that's going to have to be filled. But you only fill after the hot wire cutouts are done, because the hot wire won't cut through the filler. And now we've got a helicopter flying over, so I'll use this as a good time to quit. Okay guys, one more quick show and tell before we move on. I got the rough shaping done on one of the fuselages, except for the canopy, which I'm going to do with that 80 grit sanding tool. The coarser tools are too coarse to do fine work like on the canopy, but the rest of the shaping, including remarking these lines, every time the lines started to disappear, I came inside and remarked them. All of the time to get to this stage took 22 minutes, and I probably could have done it quicker. But anyway, at 22 minutes along, we've got all of the rough shaping done on the fuselage. Now I've got to do the canopy, and I wanted to show you from this stage forward, when you work on your foam fuselage, take about 30 seconds and make you one of these, okay? It's just from scratch foam. All it is a cradle so that your models sit in that. If you don't have one of these, from this point on, you need to sit, if you're going to sit the model down on a work surface, you need to put a towel down, because what's going to happen is that every time you lay this down on a work surface, it's got something hard on it, or even balled up pieces of foam, you're going to dent it, and that's not what you want to do. So I make up these little cradles. I've got half a dozen of them around here. Like I said, it takes just a few seconds to make, and you're done. And it's soft foam, just like this. It elevates the fuselage so that you can work on it. It holds it nice and steady. You can use weights on it if you need to work on one end or the other. But make yourself a cradle, and also get you a towel if you have to sit this down on a solid workbench. Okay everyone, that's going to do it for the rough shaping portion of this series. Off camera, and before I come back next time, I'll do the final shaping on the canopy. Now this is, a lot of this is just done by eye. Get back into your CAD program. You can draw, let me show you, maybe this will show, okay. These are just sketched in with a Sharpie roughly to act as guides for taking off foam to shape the final canopy shape, because when we did our fuselage sections, we just had a fairly large chunk of foam up here, some of which is in excess. So we're going to take that off, and I'm in the process of doing that right now. Zero had a flat front windscreen. That's easy to do with the Zester. Flat sides, rounded top. This is all done by eye, and although that might sound daunting to some, it's really quite easy, and it goes very, very quickly. I'll have this done when we get back. I'll have it done, I'll have both fuselage rough down to medium fine sanding done when we get back, and at that point we'll start talking about doing the cutouts. But go back to your CAD program, and you might want to print out just a portion showing the canopy, top view and side view, to have in front of you while you're shaping this. And it really is a lot easier to to actually do than it is to stand here and explain how to do it, because your eye is very good at seeing any sorts of discrepancies in curves and things like that, and it'll go very well for you. Okay, well, that about does it. Oh, and I will say one thing. It's very easy to take foam off. What happens is if you take off too much, it gets to be a pain to put it back on. It's, of course, doable. All you got to do, if you get a big chunk out of this, is glue a chunk in and reshape it. But if you'll go slowly when you're doing the final shaping on things like the canopy and don't take off too much foam, then you don't have to worry about repairing errors. All right, guys, that's where we are for now, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for hanging around this long.